And now we have Dan and Bradstreet expert.
Test.
Test. Christian Kellner, Senior Director, Product Go-to-Market, Supply Solutions.
Thank you very much. It's always hard to follow up, with something like that fun and insightful. Thanks, Thomas, for that insight. And being conscious of time, I expect the 5-minute, sheet to be shown to me in a second.
No.
I just need to jump to my slides. Just a second.
20 more than the other.
Yes. I need to spend 2 minutes on this. There we go. Thank you. So I just want to show you two slides before we break and head into the break. And that's really around something that you mentioned as well as we've as well mentioned by Dirk, by yourself. And how can we support, what do we need to make sure to enable transparency within our supply chain? Because it's easy to assess risk with a supplier, depending on the various risk aspects that you spend time on. But how do we make sure that we link those up with our suppliers? And that is something, of course, that we as Dun & Bradstreet can support in, right? And looking into the tariff topic, we as well discussed earlier today, looking into where do we actually have transparency and where would we need transparency, specifically around, I know if those tier 1 suppliers, do have US exposure. I usually tend to know that if I do a deep dive on them. But I usually don't know this around my tier 2s and tier 3s. So to what extent is there maybe US dependency for a critical sub-supplier of my own business? And to what extent actually do we have an impact even, to the left of this towards my clients? So what part of the whole value chain do I sit in? And to what extent am I also dependent on impact of US tariffs on my own customers? And to what extent am I at risk because they might be losing business? And this is what we are providing, transparency into the tier and supply chain. And I think something very critical that you as well just briefly highlighted around, this is not a one-way street. I mean, this picture may indicate that, but usually it might look like this, where we have different connection points from tier 3s to tier 2s, maybe also dependencies in between those tiers. And this is a live example out of a client project we did a couple months back around where do we see the impact depending on the risk factors that you are considering being relevant for your risk assessment, and how do they impact and flow through the whole supply chain, and also highlight those interdependencies. And maybe there's even a corporate structure or corporate linkage reflected here as well. So transparency to feed your risk assessment, and I think something very critical around how do we make sure that we assess the risk properly for our tier 1. And I want to, before breaking, just briefly, invite you to visit our demo booth 1, right, around how can we support. We have a capability for you to be demoed by my fantastic colleague Natalie today, that we haven't launched yet in Europe. So you're the first European audience that we're going to show this. Happy to hear your feedback, happy to get into client conversations. Please feedback how this would be of value for you. And yes, with that, I think we could lead into the break.
Perfect. Thank you very much.